Deebo Samuel trade news has started to heat up with the NFL world in Indianapolis right now for the NFL Combine. As we know, after covering the Combine for multiple years now, that's where a lot of these conversations really start to pick up and heat up. And as a result of that, we are starting to get some smoke regarding Deebo Samuel potentially getting traded, which is, I think, a welcomed development considering the fact that some of the early kind of, I would say, feelings that some people in the know had were that the 49ers were just going to have to outright release Deebo Samuel. Well, it does appear that the trade news is starting to heat up. We'll talk about that, potential landing spots, what you could get for Deebo Samuel. Also, with the NFL Combine going off right now, we'll talk about the Combine as well, draft prospects that have stood out, and guys that we think could be a good fit for the San Francisco 49ers. And as you can see, I'm home. I am back in the studio. Honestly, feels kind of weird to be here. Tony says, why am I not in Indy? Because I was in Hawaii. And based on the timing, we had a little bit of a day overlap, if you haven't been able to notice. So for me to fly out today, travel all day to get to Indy, to just be there for Saturday, Sunday, and I think Monday, it just didn't make sense. So unfortunately, weren't able to cover the Combine this year, but we will be back next year. Don't you worry. It's unfortunate. You know, I love the Combine because, as you guys know, I'd be sitting in the stands right now, scouting, doing all that good stuff. But hey, luckily we can still do that from the home base as well. So we'll talk about all those different things, and we'll get into, just chop it up, man. I haven't seen you guys in a while, so you guys already know what to do. Drop your SDS in the chat, smash that like button, and let's talk some 49ers football. Let's go. Smash that like button if you haven't already. Love to see it. What is going down, Sourdough Squad? It has been a minute. I decided that on my vacation, I wasn't going to go live. So this is the first time I've gone live in what feels like 2 weeks, which is probably one of the longest I have ever gone without doing a live on this channel. But hey, work-life balance. It's what it's all about. And now we're back into the driver's seat, getting ready to work. We're getting ready to talk all things. We got a super chat from Justin, so let's get to that one right off the rip. He says, I don't know if you saw it, but I tagged you in a video where McMillan says he hates watching football and film. Felt like a Tony moment. Oh, that's interesting. I did not see that video that you tagged me, and I will check that out. I know that Justin is a big Burden guy, and definitely wants the San Francisco 49ers to go after the Mizzou product. I did find it interesting that in Daniel Jeremiah's recent mock draft 2.0 that he left Burden completely out of the first round. So it seems like Burden's stock is dropping. So who knows? Maybe there's a chance you could even get Burden in the second round. I don't really understand why he's seemingly taking a dive right now, at least amongst these, NFL scouts who put out their boards and things like that. But Burden's a really good prospect. McMillan is a really good prospect as well. But we'll see. I'll have to check out that video that Justin is talking about. So let's see. Now that we're back in the driver's seat, trying to get back into the flow of things, let's talk a little bit about some of the news that came out today in regards to Deebo Samuel, because, like we know, he's one of the bigger topics amongst 49ers fans, based on what his future will hold. So with Deebo Samuel, we don't really know if he will be traded or if he will be cut. A lot of the early conversations around Deebo Samuel after he made his trade request known was that he was likely going to be cut because no one is going to want to trade for him. And we talked about it. His value is probably at an all-time low, all things considered. Um, but from a report that we heard today from Jordan Schultz was the fact that apparently trade conversations are starting to heat up around Deebo Samuel. So with Deebo, it sounds like some of his former colleagues, the Texans and Commanders, obviously with the Texans, you have D'Amico Ryans, and with the Commanders, you have Adam Peters, who was on staff when Deebo Samuel was drafted, and obviously throughout the time with Deebo's ascension to being an All-Pro and all those different types of things, obviously was currently on the roster. So both of those teams have the insight and intel on Deebo Samuel to feel comfortable in being aggressive and going after a potential trade of Deebo Samuel. So it's not a surprise that, according to Jordan Schultz, the Texans and Commanders are showing significant interest in trading for 49ers wide receiver Deebo Samuel, and they're continuing to have these conversations. The Steelers and Broncos have apparently shown interest in Deebo Samuel as well. And this kind of goes back to the Senior Bowl when for a good portion of one of the practices, you had John Lynch and Mike Tomlin just completely away from everyone else, just having a conversation. You're like, what are they talking about? Like, what could they be talking about over there? Could they be talking about a wide receiver? Maybe. Just maybe. But anyways, I appreciate everyone welcoming me home. My guy says, welcome back, Brad. No more vids, starting with GQ Brad. I will have to say, one of the more hilarious things about making some videos in Hawaii while I was away, obviously the hair was down quite a bit, was whenever I'd make a video, I would say a majority of the comments were about my hair, not the actual subject matter that we were talking about, but it was pretty funny. And it is good to be back. Now I just got to get back into the flow of things, get back into the work mindset. It's really easy to get away from that when you're out on the beach doing all that good stuff. But it is good to be back, and it's good to kind of figure out where we stand with the 49ers and what we could see happening and what we could see coming down the pipe. So this is the thing with Deebo Samuel. Deebo he's going to have a $31 million dead cap hit no matter what. So I've been going back and forth with this, trying to figure out like what makes more sense. Do you trade Deebo now, take on the $31 million dead cap hit in 2025, or do you designate him as a post June 1 release, which then will drop the cap hit to I think about 10 million in 2025, but it's still $20 million in 2026. So you're still paying. You're just pushing it out. And I think with the 49ers situation, with the fact that they do have some available cap space right now, and we do know they seem to be trending towards going to be paying Brock Purdy a contract, and they'll be able to kind of backload those cap hits. If they give George Kittle a contract extension, they'll be able to backload those cap hits. So if there's any time to take a significant dead cap hit, it's probably this year in 2025. And now, obviously, it's not an ideal situation. You never want to take on $31 million in dead cap, but man, they got to get something in return for Deebo. And I think if there's anything that we've learned about the San Francisco 49ers is that they are in the business of getting return on investment. They are not in the business of letting guys walk for free just because they don't want to be on the team anymore or what have you. And again, I keep referencing the situation with Jimmy Garoppolo, how they kept him on the side field, all that stuff. Ended up starting for the 49ers the following year after he'd already said his goodbyes. But the point being is they need to get something in return. Deebo Samuel, although he might be a polarizing figure on the internet, he still clearly has some value. And I think, although 49er fans might be over the Deebo Samuel situation and, lack of consistency, you did see in that game against the Miami Dolphins this year that he still has gas in the tank. It's just when does he actually show that? That is, I think, for me, it's been one of my biggest critiques of Deebo is his effort and when he decides to turn it on. Because when you have a motivated Deebo Samuel, he can be borderline unstoppable. But I think it really comes down to when is he motivated? Is he motivated this game? Is this going to be a Deebo Samuel game? And I've talked about it many times. I watch the wide receivers warm up before every single game, and I could likely tell you when Deebo Samuel is going to have a good or bad game based on his energy in warmups. It became a thing where I could track his energy, and you could kind of tell, like, oh, he's just kind of going through the motions in this warm up. And that's what the game that followed it kind of followed suit. If he was hyped in warmups and if he was super energized, you'd be like, oh, Deebo's feeling it today. He's going to have a big game. So he still has it. It's just, it's hard to determine how consistently you're going to get it. But you can still sell that. You can still present that as, look, he's still a top weapon in this league. Yes, he's older, and he's, getting close to that back end of his deal, but you could still get something in return for him. The Rams have just signed left tackle Alaric Jackson to a 3-year, $57 million deal. Not bad. So the Rams have actually made multiple moves today. They were able to retain Matt Stafford. It did look like for a second that Stafford could be leaving in free agency, or not free agency, via trade, but they were able to get something done with him. And they now just signed Alaric Jackson to a pretty substantial deal. So not bad, especially for a guy who went undrafted. That's crazy. So the Rams making moves. Will the 49ers make moves? And again, I think you got to trade Deebo. You got to get something for him. You have to get something. So what does that something look like? I think if we're talking about trades with the Commanders or the Texans, the first name that stood out to me with the Commanders was Jonathan Allen, because I have seen some rumblings that the Commanders could be looking to get out of Jonathan Allen's contract, could be looking to move on and and just kind of move on to the next phase. Now, I haven't looked at Allen's contract, so it could be pretty high. He's, at one point considered to be one of the best, if not the best, interior defensive tackles in the league. He's definitely kind of trending. He's in that age range where they're on the tail end of their careers. It's a slippery slope, especially with the situation that the 49ers just had with Javon Hargrave, where Javon Hargrave, I think he was 31 when they paid him that big time contract. He was able to get 8 sacks his first season with the 49ers, but I don't think it was the complete impact that they were looking for. Now, I'm not saying Jonathan Allen would be that, but it could be a potential option if they are looking to swap contracts and looking to, you know, make something happen. So maybe that is a potential, and the 49ers do need interior defensive tackle help for sure. So it could be an option. And with the Texans, it would be interesting to see, clearly seems like the Stephon Diggs experiment isn't going to work out. I don't want Stephon Diggs if I'm going to be perfectly honest with you. The 49ers harp um, character. And if there's anything that I've been able to take away is that Stephon Diggs is just, diva in every sense of the word, and an older diva. So not a good combo. You can deal with some diva when they're in their prime of their career and they're one of the better athletes in the league, but when they're a declining asset, being a diva on top of that, it's not a lot of fun. So I don't see that guy being an option. But with the Texans potentially moving on from Stephon Diggs, Tank Dell coming back from a serious injury, and you have Nico Collins, they could absolutely be in the business of adding another wide receiver to help out CJ Stroud. So both of those destinations make sense to me. We'll see if the San Francisco 49ers actually do anything with that. I did see something Coach Yak put out on Twitter. He said that Andrew Berry of NBC Sports is adamant that Deebo Samuel gets traded in the next couple days. I do think there is kind of a little bit of a deadline, if you will, because I do think that there is a big roster kind of trigger, a payment trigger in Deebo Samuel's contract. I think it was around mid-March. So if they keep him, they have to pay him, I think, upwards of like 12 million guaranteed if he hits that date. So I think the 49ers are trying to get out of his contract, not pay him that guaranteed money before that March date. So thank you. 3/22 is the date. And so I think that's the deadline right now, is the 49ers are trying to get out of the Deebo Samuel business by 3/22. So a little bit less than a month. Oscar coming in clutch with the information. 15 million guaranteed will be triggered on 3/22. So that's, to me, the deadline. Get Deebo out of here before you got to pay him that guaranteed money, and take on that big dead cap hit for a guy who won't be on the team next year. I think it's been abundantly clear. We heard we heard John Lynch talk at the combine, basically say that he's out of here. He's out of here for sure. So, but I'm going to open it up to you guys. I'm going to let you drive the conversation from here. What do we want to talk about? NFL combine, prospects, draft, free agency. Let me know what you guys are thinking. And what do you want to talk about? Because I'm curious. I'm curious to see what you guys have been thinking about while I've been out. And we haven't talked in a while, so I'm excited about it. Justin says, Brad, I think Gadsden runs between 4.3, 4.4 at 6'4", 247 pounds today. The 49ers met with him at the Shrine Bowl. Dude, if he runs that speed at 6'4", 247, that would be insane. Definitely some Darren Waller vibes there. I was going through some of my old clips of when I shot Cal versus Syracuse, and I got some good shots of him making some pretty crazy catches. He had this one over the middle from Kyle McCord where he just laid out and made a beautiful catch. I don't know why Kyle McCord is so slept on. If we're being honest, the Syracuse quarterback, I don't I don't know if he has like a negative stigma around him because he transferred from Ohio State. But I watched Kyle McCord live. I watched Cam Ward live last year covering Cal. I found myself more impressed with Kyle McCord. I don't know. He can spin it. He can spin it. Now, he might not have the best physical tools and like all that stuff, but I don't know, man. Kyle McCord, I feel like isn't getting enough credit. And yes, Jackson Dart is. I think there's a real chance Jackson Dart gets drafted ahead of Shedeur Sanders, just because I think Dart fits the more prototypical NFL system. I think all the knocks on Shedeur Sanders aren't about talent; it's about system fit and play style. And that matters. It really does. You can't just be an athlete in the NFL, especially at the quarterback position. How you fit into a system is huge, and how you operate within a scheme and a system is huge. Just ask Brock Purdy. Just ask anyone who's had success at the NFL level. You have to be able to operate a system, and you have to be able to play within a scheme. So we'll see. We'll see. McCord looks like a non-babyface Purdy. He kind of has some of that Purdy vibe to him. I think he's a little bit of a bigger Purdy, honestly. Eduardo says, I think the 49ers might draft Walter Nolen, most because of his talent and him being a 49er fan. Well, to be honest, I don't think the 49ers care about what fan of a team he is. I'll have to be honest with you with that. I think it's a great story. I think it's great for fans and things like that. But if I had to put myself into Tariq Ahmad's shoes or RJ Gillum's shoes or John Lynch's shoes, I don't think fandom is necessarily something that we would use to determine whether we should draft the player or not. However, if you want to draft Walter Nolen because of skill and what he could be, then we're going to have a conversation there. Because clearly, I've been high on Walter Nolen in this process. I actually I wouldn't say stumbled upon him because I knew of him. But when I was scouting Princely and doing my tape work on Princely, the edge, my eyes just kept going to Walter Nolen. They just kept going to Walter Nolen, just kept going back and back. And I was like, dude, who is this guy? This guy's a freak. And honestly, I think as long as Walter Nolen can keep his head on straight and and can be a grinder at the next level, and you can check those boxes uh in the interview. I've seen enough from him from a physical standpoint where if you take Walter Nolen at 11, I'm for it. I am for it. To me, when I went to the Senior Bowl and I was watching Nolen, he checked all the boxes that I needed to see. To me, the biggest box that he needed to check were in the run game and double teams. And one of my favorite things about Walter Nolen is his ability to get skinny on double teams and to be able to split them and be able to stand his ground and eat up blocks. And even though he's not a big guy, Walter Nolen definitely, to me, fits the mold of what the 49ers are looking for a 3-tech. So we'll see if that's where he lands, but I'm all for it. I would absolutely love that. EMA says when you get a chance, check out Kendrick Law from Kentucky. Played at Alabama for 3 years. Deebo all the way, but his build speed exceeds Deebo by far. All right, I haven't heard of him, but I will keep an eye out. Let's see. What other stuff do we got in the chat? Hendrick says, I've been talking about Harrison all week. He made some money today at the combine. He absolutely did make some money today. He ran a sub 4.340, and he did look really smooth in field drills and stuff like that. You want to know who I think quietly made some money? For whatever reason, he's not getting hyped up, like from a media standpoint. I guarantee you, NFL personnel executives saw Teddy Buchanan and they're like, who is this guy? Who is this Teddy Buchanan guy? Cal linebacker, 40-inch vertical. I think he tied for first in bench press reps. And what else did he do? I think he might have led in broad jump. His 40 wasn't as good as I thought it was going to be, which probably why he's not getting the hype. I think he ran a 4.6 40. But man, I'm telling you, like I said, I covered Cal last year, and Teddy Buchanan he reminds me of Fred Warner. And like, I can't sit here and tell you that I've watched a ton of linebackers where I'm like, that looks like a Fred Warner clone. I don't think I've ever comped anyone to Fred Warner. Now, he might not be as athletically superior as Fred is. He's like Fred Warner light. But to me, like, I don't know where his stock is going to be because I don't think he's got the media hype. But I do think internally, and again, I've sat in on Teddy Buchanan's press conferences, so I kind of have an idea of who he is as a person, how he speaks. He speaks very well. He's a local kid, and he just cares about winning. And he was one of my favorite players to cover at Cal last year, and he is someone that I want the 49ers to draft. I don't expect Dre Greenlaw to return to the 49ers, unfortunately, based on some things that I'm hearing. So I do think that the 49ers will absolutely be active in, having to add more linebacker talent. And I think Teddy Buchanan is a guy that you don't have to draft super high. I think a sweet spot for Teddy is the 3rd round. I think if you can get him in the 3rd, that's huge. I think that would be a huge, huge steal. And I do think would be a great value for him. like I said, man, I know Teddy without the testing. I know Teddy from watching him in pregame, from watching him in game. And man, you guys know when I go and I cover Cal, I'm shooting from the sideline. So that dude was literally in every play. He's everywhere. He is a heat-seeking missile. Um, he's a guy that I think will translate very, very well to the NFL. I'm all in on Teddy. And I've been all in on Teddy since I've been covering Cal. But I was just waiting for draft season to come around before we started hyping him up. But Teddy's my guy. You want to talk about my guys list? Teddy Buchanan is absolutely on that list for sure. Will the 11th pick be an offensive or defensive player? Pick 11 has to be best player available. And as I've said from the very beginning, that likely could be a defensive lineman. You had some guys really stand out at the combine yesterday. You had James Pierce Jr. and you had Shamar Stewart, both clock insane times. Shamar Stewart has went from like a second round prospect before the Senior Bowl to being a like a mid first round prospect after the Senior Bowl, and now after the combine, he might make his way up into the top 10 just with how he's tested. His RAS score was insane. What he was able to do was insane, and it's fascinating because I think we're now at the point where we're starting to see the draft fatigue, where guys who are at the top, they don't look so shiny anymore because you have these up and coming guys coming up. And does that mean guys like Mason Graham slide? Does Mason Graham slide out into 11? Because that could be an option potentially. Or if he starts sliding out of the top 6, top 7, do the 49ers be like, oh, well, we have a high grade on him. Let's jump up and go and get him. But I think, to me, the pick is defense, because I think that the best players who will be available at 11 will be defensive players, and I don't think you reach on a guy. I really don't. I really think you have to, again, build the trenches, and it starts with the defensive line. As much as I am a huge offensive line guy, the 49ers did just sign Ben Barch to a 1-year deal. Ben Barch can absolutely be a starter at left guard or center next year. So Trent Williams confirmed coming back. The 49ers signed Ben Barch to a vet minimum deal, but he will likely be a top candidate to be a starter. Question mark at center. You have Dominic Pooney at right guard, and Colton McKivitz is likely going to be your right tackle, which, as you guys know, I don't have as much of a problem with as everyone else does, considering what McKivitz is making. And I think he gave up maybe 3 to 4 sacks last year, which was he took a huge step from his first year as a starting right tackle to his second year as a starting right tackle. And I do believe he can take a even further step into year 3. So I have less of a problem with Colton McKivitz being a starter next year. I don't think Colton McKivitz is your franchise right tackle. I don't think he is going to be your starter long term, but he can be a starter right now. And so the offensive line, I think, is a little bit more intact than the defensive line. And you only have 1 year of Leonard Floyd left. You only have 1 year of Yetur Gross-Matos left. And you basically got Nick Bosa and no one else. So I think you got to get. Not only does it match need, but it matches BPA. So I do think defensive player at 11 is definitely going to be the way to go for sure. Now someone might slide. As you guys know, I've been extremely high on Will Campbell very early on in the process when everyone was telling me that what's his name? Banks Jr. out of Texas was the best offensive lineman in this class. As you guys know, I got into the tape and immediately said, no, he's not the best offensive lineman in this class. It is definitely Will Campbell. And it seems like everyone agrees who knows how to scout offensive line. And so Will Campbell, I don't think will be an option at 11. He seems like a top 10 lock at this point. I mean, the questions become: Can we get Jackson Dart into the top 10? Can we make sure Shedeur Sanders goes in the top 10? Can we get Cam Ward? I think Cam Ward probably is going to be the first quarterback off the board. But, man, can we get the other two? Can we get 3 quarterbacks in the top 10? Because, again, that just pushes the talent down to the 49ers. Honestly, can we get the tight end out of Penn State to go in the top 10? Can we get Shamar Stewart to go in the top 10? Man, if you can get some of those guys pushed up and push other guys down, man, that would be huge. But James Pierce to me is pretty intriguing from a athletic standpoint, from a profile standpoint, and when you watch his tape, he's just a freak. I think, Justin, we were talking about James Pierce last year. Pierce was a guy that we were kind of going back and forth where you were like, check out Pierce, check out this guy. And I was like, is either at the beginning or is that the end of last year, at the beginning of this year, before this year started? I think you were telling me about Pierce and to check him out. But he could be an option, honestly, at pick 11 with what he brings to the table. I'm definitely more on Pierce than I am Shamar Stewart. Shamar Stewart is he scares me a little bit because of his lack of production at Texas A&M, and he's clearly been a riser throughout the draft process, and we've seen how a lot of guys throughout the draft process have risen due to measurables, fake tape at times. But I just think that I'm definitely in the Pierce category over Shamar Stewart currently. I need to do more work on Shamar to be able to have a definitive opinion on that. But I do think Shamar definitely showed out at the Senior Bowl. He definitely had some big plays and definitely stood out for sure. So we'll see, man. We'll see how he translates to the NFL. I think some people are weary right now of him. So we'll see how that goes. Sign Dahlman so we can get Brendel out of there. Dude, Brendel was trending on Twitter yesterday, and I was trying to figure out why. I was like, is that Jake Brendel? And when I clicked on it, I think it was a tweet from Coach Yak who had listed, this is what the starting offensive line would look like today. And it was just all the comments about were like, please don't let Brendel be their starting center. I think people are going to lose their minds if they have to do another season of Brendel. And I can I can understand why they feel that way. I would say Brendel definitely regressed last year. And again, he was an older guy when he got his first start, and although he was playing decently well, um, definitely took a step back last year. And honestly, in Kyle Shanahan's offense, like you gotta have a center that you can rely on, especially in the run game. And when you look at why the 49ers struggled so much in the run game last year, a lot of it comes down to that left guard and center combo. Those two guys together just both took steps back in the run game. And um, when you have two guys take steps back on your offensive line, it it makes the entire offensive line um, diminished, right? Because you can have four guys doing exactly what they're supposed to do, executing exactly how they're supposed to execute, and you have one guy who doesn't do his job, misses an assignment, doesn't win his block, and it blows up the entire play. And it makes the whole offensive line look bad. But when you have two guys who are kind of in that same realm, who kind of consistently struggle in the run game, it was a hard watch. Last year's offensive line tape was a hard watch. And that's why when Ben Barch came in against the Bills, I'm like, oh my goodness, like, where has this been all year? Because this is what we needed. The 49ers needed someone to be able to be stout in pass protection and be a force in the run game. And that's what Ben Barch brought to the table. But unfortunately, he got hurt that following game against the Bears. But maybe it worked out for the 49ers' best interest because there wasn't enough tape on him for him to go out and get, a bigger contract. And so the 49ers were able to get him back on a 1-year prove it. So I like it. I like it for sure. But they do have to improve at the center position. Whether that's Dahlman, uh, this isn't the best draft, I would say, for center prospects. So they'll have to be creative. They'll have to be creative for sure. Um, if Gray Zabel is somehow, so one of the good things like about with some of these ascending positions, like Maxwell Harrison, if he bumps himself up into the first round, he could bump guys like Gray Zabel out of the first round. And if you can do that and bump Gray Zabel and keep him out of the first, that would be such a huge benefit for the San Francisco 49ers to be able to snag someone like that in the 40s. That would be plug and play starter at center or guard. That would be the ideal situation right there. Or you go and get a Jackson Slater in the third or fourth round, who could also potentially play center, who I think will be a center in the NFL. But you get him anywhere from 3 through 5th. That could absolutely be an option as well. Jackson Slater reminds me of McCormick, who came out of South Dakota State last year, drafted by the Pittsburgh Steelers, started for the Pittsburgh Steelers last year as a rookie. So for me, like that's how you got to try to angle it. You got to find the guys and you got to slot them into their value. And if you can come away with those guys, I think they could absolutely present a value to the 49ers and potentially be starters right away. So I know, well, Gray Zabel is absolutely going to be a starter as long as he has the opportunity to start by whatever team that drafts him. So we'll see. We'll see how it goes. For sure. let's see. What other prospects, what other things do you guys want to talk about? I think I saw someone talking tight ends earlier. Uh 49ers absolutely need tight end. Even with the hope that they are going to pay George Kittle and give him a contract extension, they still need to go after a tight end. Um, so I really hope that they go after that. And I really like Jackson Hawes. He really he really reminds me of Kittle. Like his mentality as a blocker, I think so. If there's anyone that I'm like going to be paying attention to at the combine, like really, is Jackson Hawes. If he can run a good 40 and he can show in the field drills that he has the ability to run routes, get in and out of breaks, has good hands, Jackson Hawes could definitely be like the next George Kittle prospect for sure. Just a mauler in the run game with untapped potential in the pass game. And that's exactly what my scouting report on George Kittle was. A mauler in the run game, untapped potential in the passing game. And credit to the 49ers and credit to George for being able to see that potential all the way through to what I would consider now him being the best tight end in the NFL for sure. But they need depth at tight end. They have not been able to backfill that tight end position. They didn't. They whiffed on Cam Latu. They attempted to address that position in what was a really good tight end draft. They just unfortunately didn't have first or second round draft picks, and I they have to go tight end. They need a tight end, whether free agency, whether in the draft, whether trade. They need two tight ends, and they just have not had what they need. Honestly, Sauber I don't mind, but Sauber is a third tight end. He's not a guy that I want as my tight end 2. I'll take Sauber as a tight end 3, not as a tight end 2 though. Um Helm from Texas, I definitely have I'm going to be watching Helm for sure. Um I think he fits that mold as well. He might be a little bit more athletic than Jackson Hawes, but that's what I'm going to be looking for. I want to see this. This is going to be a big tight end because the 49ers need a tight end. They really do. So I said that day one. I said that day one, and people were like crushing me, like, "Oh, this guy's jocking Warner." I'm like, no, I actually watched tape, and as a result of watching tape, I I understand Warner's impact in the run game. Even though Charlie Warner had 11 catches over 4 years with the San Francisco 49ers, he was arguably, almost on the same level as a blocker as George Kittle. That's how good of a blocker he was. And that's why he got paid by the Atlanta Falcons. Not because he's a pass catcher, but because he's an exceptional blocker. And I got a lot of heat for being like, man, I don't love that Warner got signed away. I didn't like that because I know how important he is in the run game. People gave me a ton of flack, like, oh, look at this guy crying over a backup tight end. Womp, 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 womp. Yeah, well, how are they crying when they realized they didn't have a backup tight end who could block in a system that requires two tight ends to block. So It is what it is, man. Um, but again, just more emphasis on why they have to go and get another tight end for sure. Um, it's got to happen. Got to get it done. Why not Kyle Juszczyk at on tight end 2? I don't know. They just have never tried it. Maybe they don't like him in line as a blocker. But we'll see. We'll see how it goes. See how it goes. I like Tommy Tremble, but to me, again, Tommy Tremble is more of a tight end 3 right now with upside as a pass catching tight end. I like Tommy Tremble. I'm quietly a Tommy Tremble truther, just waiting for him to get the right opportunity. I think he's only 24. He's been in the league for 4 years now. But yeah. What do I think the 49ers care in a college player? What he has to be? Tough. He has to be he's got to love football. And he's got to be a good person. I talk about it all the time, and I've talked about it ever since I started doing content and started doing draft coverage. Is the hardest thing to scout is the person. I don't think it's particularly hard to scout talent. For whatever reason, it comes very naturally to me. It comes very easy to me. And to me, I can tell pretty quickly based on multiple different factors whether I think a player is going to be good or not, watching them on film, watching them in workouts, watching them in the warm-up line. For whatever reason, it just comes naturally to me. The thing that is much harder to do is being able to determine a person's mindset, their heart, and being able to determine how these guys handle adversity, how they handle fame, how they handle ebbs and flows of that. That to me is where the 49ers have done a pretty good job of being able to identify good people who love football. Because one thing that you're going to find is that when you find someone who genuinely loves what they do, they're going to work as hard as possible to be the best they can at what they do because they love what they do. And believe it or not, and I really don't think a lot of people wrap their minds around this who are fans of football, but for a lot of these guys, football is a job. It isn't their passion. It's a job. They're good at it. They excel at it. They have great physical tools. And so they're like, well, I'm good at this. So I'm going to do it because this is my opportunity. This is how I can take advantage of my ability. Those are the guys that you kind of are weary of, right? You're kind of like, do you love it? Like, do you love it? And I do think the 49ers have been able to figure that out. I think a huge part of football is mental. So you would be doing a disservice as a scout, as a general manager, as a director of player personnel, if you aren't doing a full psychological eval. Like you have, and that was one thing that I learned as a player. Like you could look the part, you could you could have all the strength and speed and all of that in the world. But if you're not locked in mentally, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. And that's why there are guys who don't have all the physical tools and everything that makes you go, ooh, and ah, but have phenomenal careers, become Hall of Famers because their mindset is different, because they're built different. They're they love it. There is a intangible element to it. Brock Purdy is a perfect example of what an intangible element can do for a player. A guy who's going to work and work and work and hone his craft, improve the physical attributes, improve the mental attributes, and just work and work and work. Be able to have the confidence to withstand the noise, so be able to withstand the scrutiny. Like that is a huge part in today's NFL. And if you can't handle that, you're not going to be a good football player. Doesn't matter how good you are. Doesn't matter how Kadarius Toney athletic and freak you are. If you can't put it together up here, you will never last in the NFL. It just doesn't happen. So that's what I think 49ers care for. I think, again, we all assess the physical tools and the traits and the film. That's the easy part, in my opinion. The easy part is being like, oh, look, that guy's big, that guy's fast, that guy has long arms, that guy can jump out the gym, that guy can cover this guy, that guy can stand up double teams. That's the easy part. The hard part is understanding who these people are, who they are, and how that intertwines with their physical skill set. And honestly, why I do think that I have also had I would consider myself a successful evaluator. I know I don't do it for a team or anything like that, but I've been doing this long enough to know I know how to evaluate talent. And you don't get them all. I definitely have my list of misses, just like everyone does. Um, but my hit rate is so much greater than my miss rate. And I feel very confident in my ability to be able to evaluate all those different layers that goes into what makes a player good. And I think the 49ers do actually attack it that way. And so that's what I think they care for. I think they care for who the player is and what that means, and how they move and all that good stuff. Um Seems like a top of the draft has some players with character concerns. Honestly, this and I think this is why this is a great draft to either trade for a proven commodity or trade back. Um, that's why I'm like I'm so high on the Max Crosby thing. One, I'm high on Max Crosby because I've heard some things. You're also kind of seeing, like, I can tell that Tim Kawakami is hearing the same things that I've heard. Like, I can tell by how he's speaking and and how he's reporting the things with the edge stuff. And if you guys missed it, I'll show you what he said yesterday. I think he's here. I think he's hearing the same thing that I'm hearing. And that's why I'm like, okay, I I can tell when another reporter or something is hearing something similar than what I'm hearing. So this is what Tim put out yesterday. He said, I've heard from a few NFL sources that the 49ers have been mentioned as a popular potential destination for at least a few top defensive linemen who have quietly started looking around should they get waived for salary savings or hit the trade market. For me, that name on the list is Max Crosby. Um, I don't know if he's going to get traded, but I think the potential for him to get traded is real. I think that he could absolutely be playing for a different team next year. He's under contract for 2 more years, and he needs a new contract because there's no guaranteed money left on his deal. If you guys are paying attention at home, you should be able to recognize how the NFL works and how contracts work. If there's no guaranteed money left on these deals, but there are years remaining, you cannot expect players to play on those deals. It's not that it doesn't happen, but it's rare that it does when you have a really good player. So when you look at these things and you start to see, all right, these guys have years left, but there's no guaranteed money on it. Well, they're not going to play on that deal. They're either going to ask for a reworked contract or they're going to ask for a trade. That's how it works. That's just how the business of the NFL works. So that's the situation that's going on with Crosby. The thing with Crosby is you also have Myles Garrett and potentially Trey Hendrickson. So if multiple names become available for a potential trade and you get all of these guys on the trade market, I do think that's where uh I do think that's where this happens. And I think I keep hearing the same situation over and over again. Mark Davis on his deathbed wouldn't trade Crosby to the San Francisco 49ers. Mark Davis isn't running the show anymore, people. He might be the owner, but I think there was an even a report earlier this week that said Tom Brady is working 24/7 with the Raiders. Like he is effectively running the show. And there has when you make that change as an owner to turn over, these decision making processes to someone else, like a Tom Brady who has the cachet. Do you think Tom Brady cares about the San Francisco 49ers? No, he does not care. He does not care. What Tom Brady cares about is building the team. And that's why Davis has been a bad owner, because he let personal indifference get in the way prior with the Khalil Mack trade than actually just going after what would be best for the team. And on top of that, again, I talk about this all the time. The 49ers and Raiders were in conversations to trade for Jacoby Myers. They were having conversations. So if you are really telling me that, oh, Mark Davis would never trade any player to the 49ers, then why are the 49ers and Raiders engaging in conversations? What is there to talk about? If a trade between the Raiders and 49ers is a non-starter, then why would they be talking? Why is that a thing? Why would they even pick up the phone if the 49ers were on the no trade list? Oh, we can't do business with the 49ers. Yeah, to me that makes more sense when they shared the same market and the 49ers were running the market. But they're not in the same state anymore. It's not the same. It's completely different. So, I don't buy it. I really don't. I really, really don't. Uh, Jeb says, I know someone who works at Raiders training facility. Max is there every day. I don't think he's leaving. I actually don't doubt that Max Crosby is there every day. That's why I like Max Crosby, because just like we talked about with what you're looking for in a prospect or whatever, what you're looking for in these guys is you're looking guys who love it. Max Crosby loves it. That's why I like Max Crosby a lot. I really do. And but just because you're in the building every single day doesn't mean you aren't going to get traded, because they're not trading him because he doesn't want to be a Raider or doesn't want to be a part of that. They would be trading Crosby because they're resetting their roster. They're resetting their foundation. And with Max Crosby, they haven't won anything. So rather than paying this guy a bunch of money when you don't have a quarterback, because you have to think about it from a front office perspective, put yourself in the Raiders' shoes. All right, let's pay Max Crosby all this money because he's a great edge rusher. Okay, well, we don't have a quarterback, so it doesn't matter how much we're paying said edge rusher. We're not going to win any games without a quarterback. And okay, well, maybe we land Shedeur Sanders. Okay, well, it's probably going to be a couple years before Shedeur actually reaches his potential. By that time, Max Crosby's in his 30s. He's on the decline, and we're letting Crosby go. Opposed to the idea of, well, instead of paying Crosby this money, although we love him as, a face of the franchise and someone who's been here, maybe we go get some assets instead and we rebuild this roster, especially considering the fact that Max Crosby wasn't drafted by Tom Brady. Max Crosby isn't like locked in with this coaching staff. He was a big Antonio Pierce guy. And I don't know. I think Crosby has made it pretty clear that he does Max Crosby want to go through a rebuild at the age of 27 and realize that 2 years into the rebuild that it's not working, and then you're 29 like Myles Garrett and being like, I need to get out of here because I want to win. I care about winning, and we're not winning here. So I think there's a lot of layers. I think there's a lot of layers to the Max Crosby thing. And I do think just chalking it up to, oh, well, Mark Davis would never trade him to the 49ers. I don't think that's realistic. I don't think that would be the reason. I think the reason why it wouldn't happen is, one, the Raiders aren't shopping him. Like, they're actually not going to trade him. Or two, it just costs too much. Those to me are the reasons why it wouldn't work. Is the compensation to trade for him is too high, or the Raiders truly aren't in the business of trading him, so they will pay him and move on. But I don't think the Mark Davis thing is a reason. I really don't. So we'll see. We'll see. But I don't know. I think it's a fascinating situation, because if I'm the San Francisco 49ers, I am still trying to flip this roster very quickly. I don't think Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch, as much as I like them, have the ability to just sit on their hands and be like, yeah, we'll just backfill with, cheap, cost-effective guys, Yetur Gross-Matos, Malik Collins, Isaac Yadam, just backfill with fringe roster guys and just expect that, boom, all of a sudden, like, just plugging in those names will somehow fix that situation. So I don't think they have to be. I don't think they should be careless in their spending, but I think they need to spend. I think they need to potentially get a plug and play center if they can, or have Barch play center, draft a guard, like I said, like Ray Zabel. I don't necessarily love the idea of a starting rookie center in this system. So I would feel more comfortable, I think, with Barch at center and then drafting another guard and putting him at left guard. And then you basically have two experienced tackles on the outside, a center with some experience, Pooney heading into year two, and then you plug in another rookie on the left. And I think, boom, all of a sudden your offensive line is looking a little bit better than the year prior. But they gotta figure out this defensive line, man. They really do. The defensive line, you guys know from how I was talking about it last year. I talked about it all offseason. It's like, man, my biggest question is this defensive line. After free agency, after the draft, I was like, I don't know about this defensive line. You know, I like Yetur Gross-Matos. Leonard Floyd, I'm skeptical. Malik Collins doesn't feel like an upgrade over Eric Armstead. And then you lose Javon Hargrave right away. And just injury after injury after injury on the defensive line. I was like, yeah, we're cooked. We're cooked on the defensive line. And you could see that heading into the season, how thin the margins were, and they just got injured. They got injured, right? I don't mind Malik Collins. I don't like Malik Collins as a every down defensive tackle. I like Malik Collins as a situational pass rusher on the interior. That's where I like Malik Collins. I think Malik Collins played well. I do, but I don't like him as a run stuffer. I like him as a rotational interior defensive lineman, not a 3-down starter. I think Evan Anderson also too can be a guy that fills in and is a rotational defensive tackle, who has upside to potentially become a starter one day. But they really gotta fix that defensive line. And I mean, honestly, like I would float the idea to the Raiders, like, all right, you don't want to trade Crosby, or you want something in return. I will send you Leonard Floyd in the trade to get Crosby. Honestly, that's how I would work it. It would be great to have both Crosby and Floyd, but I would also, like, if that's what it took, I would consider that for sure. So we'll see. We'll see if it happens. If there's anything that I've learned about all the behind the scenes stuff in the NFL, is there's a lot of things that you hear but that don't necessarily like come to light. Doesn't mean it's not true. It just doesn't necessarily happen. So we'll see. We'll see. I'm not sitting here saying that it's absolutely going to happen. I'm just saying that the possibility that it could happen, I think, are realer than people are giving credit to. Doesn't mean it's going to happen. I just think that there is a legitimate chance that it could happen. Justin says, man, I really like Elodie. Said he studies Karlaftis and looks like a really similar high motor, high power edge. Yeah, I agree. I haven't done a ton of work on him, but in just the kind of initial traits pool, that was the first thing that stood out, was his motor. And I think that's my favorite thing about defensive linemen. When you can see they have a crazy motor, it it really is beneficial, for sure, for a defensive lineman. You look at like Braden Fisk, insane motor. One of the reasons why I like Max Crosby, insane motor. You got Nick Imanwari running right now. Dude is a physical freak. You talk about the South Carolina safety. Um, a lot of people have been mentioning him heading into the combine, and it sounds like he's as advertised. Um, he's definitely a guy who could be fun to watch. This is an interesting comment. Forget that if you lose Deebo Samuel, your dreams are over for Super Bowl. I don't necessarily agree. Um, I don't agree with that. I think that Deebo Samuel's been great for the 49ers, but I think there's also a time and a place where things get a little stagnant, and I just think that's where we're at with Deebo. You go back to that Rams game. That Rams game, I think, encapsulates why it's time to move on. It just felt like when it was really weird. Like, it was a really weird watch because I think with Debo's tweet that week prior, it had everyone paying attention to Deebo. And so there was an interesting trend that was developing in that game. When Deebo was in, it felt like they were force feeding him, and it wasn't translating to production. It wasn't translating to the 49ers moving the ball. When Deebo went out of the game, it was like they started picking up rhythm. And then when Deebo would come in, it's like the rhythm stagnated because it went to get Deebo the ball. And then Deebo wasn't really taking advantage of it. And then Deebo would leave the field. And then when he left the field, the rhythm would pick back up again. I was like, oh, this is really interesting. It's really interesting. And so, although I do like uh, Deebo and what he's brought to the table, I don't think that he is the reason that the 49ers won't be able to get back to the Super Bowl. If anything, to me, the reasons lie in the trenches. And I think at where Deebo is currently right now, um, I do think Deebo could be replaced just based on where he's at. Makuba just ran a 4.46, took him in mock draft 1.0. There's a couple guys that I'm looking for in this safety class. Nick Imanwari was one of them. Makuba, Malachi Starks. I'm interested in how Craig Woodson will do out of Cal. He'll be a later round draft prospect, but I'm curious about him. Sanker just ran a 4.48 out of Virginia. Oh, dude, that Rams game was crazy. So Deebo Samuel drops the first pass, right? Like, after all that crazy crap that happened throughout the week, the first play goes to Deebo. He drops it. A guy in our section stands up, turns around, and says, I just want to let all of you know I hate Deebo Samuel, and I'm going to be yelling at him all game. I'm like, oh boy. Um, it was pretty crazy. It was a pretty crazy experience, honestly. I've never really felt Levi's have a disdain for their own player before. Um, and it was really apparent. It was really apparent that the entire fan base had turned on Deebo. Like they were done. The Deebo rise and fall, like it was apparent. Like, and it wasn't just this one guy in our section. It was everyone. Every chirp got chirped that entire game by the 3 sections that I could like actually hear outside of the mass booing. It was crazy. I go to a lot of 49er games and I've been to a lot of games at Levi Stadium. I've never seen that stadium turn on its own player. And it did. Absolutely 100%. Just completely was like, oh my, it was bad. It was rough. It was rough because that was also too the 49ers playoff chances just evaporated right in front of them. So it was that was after. That was after the lock-in moment. So yeah, man, just so I don't like I said, I don't think I think Deebo's been great, and I think Deebo's been a huge part of this team and been a big element to the 49ers offense. But I just don't think he's an element that teams are scared of anymore. And they figured out how to neutralize. So he's not a particularly, like I said, he doesn't play particularly well without the ball in his hands. And I don't know. Just think it's time. Starks just ran a 4.5 40, 4.5 flat. So a couple safeties for sure that I don't mind. Yeah, so I wonder what's going on with Burden. I'm looking at Bucky Brooks mock draft 2.0. He has him going 26. It definitely seemed like at the beginning of the draft process, Burden was like a top 15 lock. Now it's like all of a sudden, you know, these draft guys have him not like around 15. They have him either in the late 20s or completely out of the first round. So I'm really curious to why that is. McMillan, he's falling down. He could be out of the top 10 based on at least the way everyone's doing these mocks and all of this stuff. It just seems like, and this happens every year. This happens every year where the guys who start at the top, there's only one place for them to go, and that is down. So it just happens every year like clockwork. Guys will come test, jump out the gym, and then all of a sudden we forget like all the tape that they put up on, you know, throughout the year that had them ranked so highly, and just kind of messes with it. But yeah, these mocks are going to look a lot different. I see James Pierce at 30. I don't think that's going to happen. Like Burden on this mock went 32 from Eric Edholm. They're showing it on the ticker at the bottom on NFL Network. So, like I said, I don't know. I don't know what happened to Burden. Again, I haven't done a lot of tape work on him because I really had the perception that he would be a top 15 pick. And I didn't really think that the 49ers would spend another first round draft pick on a wide receiver just based on the other needs and BPA combined. But everyone has Burden sliding way far. Lance Zierlein has McMillan at 17 to the Bengals. Burden at 18 to the Seattle Seahawks. That's one of the things that I kind of like about these drafts is that there's not a defined order. They're all kind of in the same category. Like outside of the top 10, everyone's kind of similar. And that's what makes this a great trade back draft, honestly. Trade back, get more picks in the top. If you get additional picks in the top 50, top 75, you could definitely come away with some really, really solid players. You could definitely come away with solid players at 11. But you could also come away with some big time players in like the 20s to 40s. So we'll see. We'll see what happens, but it's always fascinating to see how it works. Hendricks wants another live mock draft. Yeah, we're definitely going to be cooking up next week. Obviously, it's Friday, and with the combine going on throughout the weekend, but next week, I'm excited to get back to work. I'm not going to lie to you guys. Um, I s- I struggle with not working. It's weird. I need to not work because I have a family, and so I have to, have a better balance to this all. But as you guys know, if rocked with me in any sense over the last couple of years, I work a lot. And it's a weird feeling taking time off. Like it doesn't feel normal when I'm not working. Like it feels weird. It feels very abnormal. I feel uncomfortable. I'm like, something's missing, something's off. Um, I'm like, I'm enjoying myself quite a bit, but also at the same time, it's like it doesn't feel normal, to not be working, not doing something 49ers related. So, ooh, 438 for Nick Amanwari. He seems like a top 20 guy to me. I feel like his stock has been all over the place, but especially with solidifying that speed and his size, and how he plays, he definitely seems like a top 20 kind of guy to me. So we'll see. He said, "Look like you were filming a Pantene commercial or something out there." That dude, one comment that took me out was like someone said, "Brad's trying to get Head and Shoulders, uh, a Head and Shoulders brand deal." I was like, "Dang, man." One of my favorite things about letting the hair down was the people who don't know I have long hair. Because, like, as you guys know, when I make videos, this is typically the setup. I got the hair bunned up, doesn't look like I have long hair. And then I'll make a video, my hair's all out. They're like, "What? You have long hair?" I think that's one of my favorites when see that we've surprised some. JM said Brad lost aura since leaving Hawaii. Hawaii low key. You was glowing in those videos. I was very red and in my element. Um, I think one of the best compliments that I ever got was walking into a shop and the lady asking me if I was a local. She's like, "You local?" I'm like, "No." She's like, "Well, you could pass as one." I was like, "Hell yeah. Thank you. You just made my day." All right, Makuba back up. Can he get under 4.4? His first run was a 4.46. Can he get under that? Four, 4.6. Back to back to back. Honestly, I thought Makuba would run faster. I thought he could be a sub 4.4 guy, but I mean, sub 4.6, splitting hairs at that point. But yeah, Nick Imanwari being 6'3", 220 pounds. Dude, there's just some freaks out here, man. Just some absolute freaks. That's crazy to be that big and run that fast. I'm excited about this class though, man. This would be like I talked about. This would be such a good class to be able to have a lot of picks in the top 100 because there are some really good players. I thought Nick Martin stood out from OSU. Just looks the part. My guy Teddy Buchanan, I already talked about him. I thought he made some money testing um, as well. He led multiple groups. I think he led in vertical jump. I think he was tied in. He's tied for fourth in broad jump. I think he was tied for first in like first or second in bench press. He's tied for first in bench press with 26 reps. I'm a big Teddy Buchanan guy, man. You guys already know. Like, I think Teddy Buchanan, he's an NFL linebacker. And I would love for him to stay in the Bay Area. He is a Bay kid, went to UC Davis, then went to Cal. If he could stay in San Francisco, play for the 49ers, that would be phenomenal. But I'm a big Teddy B guy, like big time. I get asked a lot, like who are draft crushes. Like Teddy's a definite draft crush. I'm banging the table. Like I would be that guy in the draft room, passing notes up to John Lynch around the third round, being like, Teddy's on the board. I'd be like, John, Teddy's on the board. He's still there. Take him. I would annoy the crap out of John Lynch about being like, dude, you need to draft Teddy. I would be standing on the table saying, "You have to draft Teddy. You got to put him with Fred. Not only do they play alike, they look alike." And how would that aesthetic look? Fred and Teddy, just I love it. I'm actually upset that Teddy cut his hair a little bit. Lost a couple uh uh aura points with me with that. Bring him in as a UDFA? What are you talking about, man? What are you talking about? The 2021 draft class was crazy. Oh, Craig ran a 4.46 on his first attempt. I like Craig Woodson as well. I enjoyed watching him. 4.51 second attempt. Craig Woodson, to me, if you get him as a later prospect for depth, I would absolutely be down for that. But yeah, the 2021 draft class had us all fooled. All of us. I think it's the ebbs and flows of archetype, and the Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson archetype was at its peak. So any kind of quarterback that resembled any of those guys, they got pushed real high. And because of that, you can see there aren't really those kinds of uh quarterbacks in this class. You have your Cam Ward and your Shedeur Sanders, but man, if this was 2017, probably Cam Ward and Shedeur Sanders are second, third round draft picks based on the archetype um, that everyone was looking for. That's why Trubisky went one, or was the first quarterback off the board over Deshaun Watson, over Patrick Mahomes, is because the archetype hadn't swung that way yet. Dude, how does my necklace keep coming undone? What is this? Witchcraft. What is this witchcraft? So we'll see. We'll see how it goes. I'm enjoying vibing with you guys. Hour 38. We've been on live. I guess that's what happens when you don't do a live for 2 weeks. But I've enjoyed talking ball with the squad. It's been a while. It's been a while. But I think there's really a lot of elements to this offseason that are going to be big for the 49ers. Big time. I miss you too, man. I missed all of you. But this is a fun one because I'm big into roster building, big into draft, big into free agency, big into pulling those pieces together to see how it translates to the season. This is a big offseason. It's the biggest offseason that they have had since 2021, since the Trey Lance draft. This is a big one. And the reason why it's big is because of that, because of whiffing on Trey Lance, because of really just having poor draft classes the last couple years outside of last year's draft. Like last year's draft really saved them a lot of headache by hitting on how many guys they hit on. Finding a starting cornerback, finding a starting guard, finding a starting safety. That's insane. To be at finding, Ricky Pearsall is going to be a starting wide receiver. Finding Evan Anderson, role player on the defensive line. That's a huge, huge draft that they had to crush, and they did it. And they have to do it again because they've had too many misses. All the Danny Grays and the Ty Davis Prices and just, the way that, Drake Jacksons have turned out. The situation with what's his name? We just talked about him earlier. The tight end out of Alabama. I don't know why I'm blanking on his name. Just talked about him. But you get my point. Those misses have really hurt. Thank you, Cameron Latu. Those misses have really hurt this team, and really hurt their depth and roster construction. And it's forced them to have to go cheap on some free agents that they were hoping would be more impactful and get a better value out of, and it hasn't come to fruition. So this is a huge offseason. They really do have to really hit on this free agency, and they really have to hit on this draft. And because I don't think they can afford another 6-11 season. I've pushed back a lot on the hot seat narratives, on the fire Kyle Shanahan narratives, all of that stuff. But if the 49ers fall on their face next season and they don't make the playoffs, those conversations I do think will become real. And I do think they will have more validity to them. I think we can rationalize a lot of the issues that the 49ers had last year. I think we really can. In a lot of different ways. Shanahan, taking on some of that blame as well. But there are a lot of injuries, a lot of weird things, a lot of weird energy, contract drama, all of it. It all played a role, especially after losing the Super Bowl. And if we get a repeat of that, then it'll be an interesting situation. I do believe. So it's imperative that for Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch that they don't cruise control this. They got to put pedal to floor, and they got to make some moves, and they got to make good calculated moves that fill. There's a lot of holes on this roster, but if they can fill the holes correctly, I do think they can be back in a flash. I really do. But that's why this offseason is going to be very entertaining to me. Very instrumental or detrimental to this next upcoming season. So, got to get free agency. I mean, I know we've been focusing a ton on the draft, but we got to get through free agency first. And it'll be really interesting to see how they attack that. I think there are solid options available at safety, at cornerback, at linebacker, and at defense. I mean, free agency might be the route to go for linebacker, cornerback, and safety. Draft interior defensive tackle, draft edge, or trade for edge. So you don't have a ton of options at center, but you might have to go center in free agency. Tight end free agency isn't that great, so you're gonna have to draft a tight end. You could definitely backfill wide receiver depth in free agency. I think this would be a good draft to grab a running back in the mid rounds and get a free agent quarterback. Ooh, I like this take. Justin says, I think Burden is being slept on like Justin Jefferson was, in my opinion, and ends up being great. I like this take as someone who was in the Justin Jefferson as being insanely slept on category. I love that my two favorite wide receivers from that class were CeeDee Lamb and Justin Jefferson. Out of all of those conversations about Henry Ruggs, Jerry Jeudy, Jalen Reagor, Denzel Mims, DK Metcalf, that's a different draft. Obviously, CeeDee Lamb, Justin Jefferson. My two favorites were CeeDee Lamb and Justin Jefferson. And they turned out to be the best two of them all. I'm just saying. Just saying. Oh, Ayuk was in that class. I actually didn't scout Ayuk, so I can't take credit on Ayuk. I remember there were so many wide receivers, and I was just like, I was so sure on Justin Jefferson and CeeDee Lamb that I was like, I got to a point where I was like, man, there's so many good wide receivers. I've seen enough. And apparently the one wide receiver I didn't watch, Brandon Ayuk, the 49ers drafted, turned out to be a really good wide receiver. But we'll see what happens. Chili says, man, the season has flown by. In a couple weeks, we'll be talking about Brian Burns already. No, I think the Brian Burns agenda has officially come to an end. And I've come to terms with it. The Max Crosby agenda has now taken full effect and taken over the Brian Burns agenda. So I'm currently in the business of pushing Max Crosby to the 49ers propaganda. And I will continue to do so until he is either signed to an extension by the Raiders or traded elsewhere. So we'll see how it goes. But like I said, good to be back talking with you guys. I'll be fully back. Facts. We can put a gravestone on it now. It is no more, but it was a glorious time. Hey, I did. So like I said, I've been aware of James Pierce, I think, since last year when Justin was talking to me about him, sending me some clips of him. So I've been aware of Pierce for a while. I just haven't gone into his tape this year. I knew he was an athletic freak. I knew he was going to be a top prospect. I just hadn't done the work yet. And so after he ran, I was like, all right, do a deeper dive. And then you do the deeper dive and you're like, yeah, he's freaking good. He is a prototypical speed edge, but does have power. So, Michael says, I'm concerned that we won't pay for any high price free agents or make any trades. They should. They should. I think it would be a mistake to not do that. Um, for the reasons that I mentioned. Um, they have to keep pushing the chips into the middle. It doesn't mean overextend yourself and make it so you uh, are just like all in on next season, but you got to flip this roster a little bit, and you got to inject some talent. And I know it's unfortunate timing with Brock Purdy's contract coming up. Um, but it is what it is. If Brock's your quarterback and you believe in him to be your quarterback, all right, you're gonna have to pay him, and you're gonna have to go. You're still gonna have to build a team around him. It doesn't matter. Um, it's just how this offense is built. Um, offense is built to be a run first team. It's it's built to have a guy to be an elite processor, and if you feel like you got that guy, you got to pay him. And yeah, we're real old, and the reason why we're old is because we have missed on so many draft prospects. Um, we have missed on so many drafts. Again, last year was a good year, but we did draft older rookies and did show um, a lot of promise. You can't franchise tag someone who's under contract next year, so that's not an option. Yeah, I think obviously hindsight being what it is, like the Trey Lance trade was very unfortunate. Very unfortunate. What would have been the ideal situation is that they never traded, and if they had the interest of trading, they waited. And I understand the logic. I think they believed that if they were to go up and get one of those quarterbacks, they had to do it when they did it. And if, Trey worked out, no one would care. Um, right. But it didn't work out. And it, the ramifications from it have been real tough. The crazy part of this all really is, what if you like, I don't think we ever think about this too often, but what if the 49ers did the Trey Lance trade without finding Brock Purdy? Does anyone ever like wrap their heads around, like, are John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan still the head coach and GM of the 49ers if they don't find Brock Purdy? Because, you know, let's say in 2022, you have Trey Lance and Jimmy Garoppolo, but no Purdy, and you still have Jimmy Garoppolo going down in that game against the Dolphins. Who's coming in? What quarterback would have gone in and played? And remember with Purdy came in and immediately outplayed Jimmy Garoppolo, um, and went undefeated until his arm got ripped off. And so who's the quarterback? Are they winning games? What are they doing that following year? Are they running it back with Trey Lance? Jimmy would be gone at that point. Are they drafting another quarterback? Or do they go into the season with like, all right, even though Trey broke his ankle, we got to run it back with Trey. Trey's going to be the starter again. What would 2023 look like with Trey Lance as your quarterback in 2023? So it's just crazy to think about. What if game, right? We could play that game all day long. What if? But I think one of the biggest what ifs is what if they never found Purdy with the Trey Lance trade? And, what if they were able to trade Jimmy and they trade Jimmy and you only have Trey Lance? What happens then? You don't even have Jimmy to fall back on to save your season. So crazy, man. It's crazy. The 49ers are a fascinating team. They're really fascinating. They're like it's so crazy how they're good, but they've had misses, but they've still been able to remain successful. Oh, dude, it's a crazy dynamic with how with how it all worked. Um, but that's why football is the NFL football is the best reality TV show there is, if you ask me, because there's so many twists and turns and so many things change. Margins of error are so paper thin. You have the injury element. You have the roster turnover element. There's just so many things that can change and just be different in a heartbeat. So it's crazy. And it's a good point by Hendricks. He says that's called culture. That's why Kyle's done a great job as a head coach, 100%, because they have built a staff, they have built a front office and a locker room to be able to withstand a lot of things for sure. But you got to keep adding to it. You got to keep building and you got to keep stacking. And honestly, for me, it's like I don't want the 49ers to find themselves in a situation where they could be talking about moving on from Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch. Like, if we're up to me, they would have, I think if it was up to any of us, they would have won a Super Bowl already, and we wouldn't even have to entertain any of these conversations. But when you lose two and you lose heartbreaking NFC championship games and in the fashion in which you lose them, it's the reality of the situation. It is what it is, right? Like There's a world that exists where John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan should be untouchable. There's a range of outcome where they win 2 Super Bowls. And the notion of even mentioning either one of those two on the hot seat gets you bullied off the internet. But we understand what the outcomes were and how it went down. And unfortunately, that keeps those doors and narratives open. So, and we've seen how easy it is for things to build momentum. You have a down year, you go 6-11. There's a lot of reasons why, but you go 6-11. If you duplicate that again and you go 6-11 2 years in a row, whoa, the conversation changes dramatically. So, regardless of all the things that you've done in the past. So, big year for the 49ers, big offseason, and I love it. I love it. To me, the 49ers have to win the offseason. They do. They're in a competitive uh, division where everyone's kind of in the same spot, honestly. Um, you look at the Rams, they just kept Stafford, just signed their tackle. They have a phenomenal young up and coming defensive line. And yes, they got Puka. Sounds like they're going to be moving off of Cooper Kupp, but they still got Kyron Williams. They still have talent. And if they add more talent, the Rams could be a very dangerous team in a hurry. I mean, they did go to the playoffs. Seattle, they're honestly not that crazy far off. They had new coaching change. They had a switch in philosophy, so there'll be a little bit of a ramp up period with them. We saw the Arizona Cardinals played really well, not having a ton of talent. If they have a good draft class, if they have a good free agency, like this isn't a time for the 49ers to just sit back and just kind of, I would say this isn't the time to duplicate last year's offseason. I felt last year's offseason was let's try to get by. Let's try to get Leonard, instead of getting one really good edge, let's try to split it up and get a Leonard Floyd and a Yetur Gross Matos. Um, you know, we have to move on from Eric Armstead, so let's find a guy we could plug in a Malik Collins. Even though he's not to Eric Armstead's caliber, he could provide, like they gotta figure some things out. They got to figure some things out, and they that's why it's such an imperative offseason. And the reason why they've already started off in a good trajectory is because they have had some good coaching hires. Bringing in Robert Saleh, bringing in Gus Bradley, bringing in Brant Boyer, bringing in the DB coach from Boston College, kind of retooling the staff a little bit. That's a good start. It's a good start, and it needed to start there. They really needed to fix their defensive coaching situation. And I think they did. It might not be for long, but they did for now. And that's what's most important. And just like John Lynch said, felt like they had sloppy eights because that's what it felt like. It felt like throughout the whole coaching period, like we weren't anyone's first choice. We were if I don't get this job, we'll come over. Or if I don't get this job and that job and this job, then I'll come get hired by you. 49ers, I think, are at a bit of a crossroads in regards to their legacy, that being Kyle and John. And I think they've done a phenomenal job for the most part. Again, not perfect by any stretch of the imagination in both the free agency and draft categories, where they've had misses, but they've also had hits. And this is a year they have to hit. They can't miss. They cannot miss at all. Like, the margin of error for this offseason to me is paper thin, and it will determine the future of this franchise for the next 5 years, this offseason. So that's why I think it's such a heavy emphasis on it. That's why I think it's really important. And that's why I think this will determine if Kyle and John will be here for the next 5 years. Uh, and so that's why I'm saying don't sit back. Don't just act like everything's okay. No, you got to go. You got to go full bore. I don't even care if you have to take on a bit of a Madden mentality. Like, you got to. You have to hit on the draft, and you have to add key players through free agency or the draft. I don't think you need a ton through free agency or trade, but there are some key spots. You could, if you're not, I mean, it basically feels like they're moving on from Talanoa Hufanga. I think they're preparing for Dre Greenlaw to sign elsewhere. And so that means you have to, and I don't think Jair Brown is where they want him to be. So that means you potentially have to go out and sign a Javon Holland, a Trayvon Morig at safety. If you can get a Paulson Adebo at cornerback, someone like that who probably won't be cheap, but I mean, I'm not going to lie, the these 1 year free agent signings that they have had, whether Isaiah Oliver or Isaac Yadam, just haven't worked. So you potentially have to go for a cornerback. At linebacker, you go for a Sherwood. I think you have to go there as well, and then you have to make your splash on the defensive line. Like, you have to crush this defensive line retooling. You have to. So whether that's drafting a defensive lineman at 11, whether it's trading 11 for a defensive lineman, they have to put together a defensive line that will last them for the next 5 years, 4 years, in my opinion. So we'll see. I thought there was one really interesting thing that John Lynch said. I think I wish I had it in front of me. He kind of corrected himself, and he's like, Kyle was like gracious enough to let me sit in on an interview, and then he caught himself and was like, well, like, I was able to sit in on these coaching interviews, and I'm just like, man, I wonder how much Kyle actually has. I think there needs. I don't know. I don't want to take too much from what could have just been a slip of the tongue, but it just feels like John Lynch deserves more say in the future of the 49ers and what goes on. And he just strikes me as someone who has like a real read of the league, understands how to read people's personalities. I don't know. I don't know what his role is. Like 100%. I know he's obviously the general manager and all of that stuff, but there's just I don't know. It's definitely a collaborative environment. I do believe, but I do obviously think that we know Kyle's the big boss, and I don't know, maybe take some off of Kyle's plate a little bit. And that's why I think, when you have the uh hiring of Robert Saleh, that's really why I think it's such a great signing, is because Kyle doesn't have to do the defense anymore. He can focus on the offense now. So we'll see. But I think we're over 2 hours. If you stayed for this whole show, I appreciate you. Again, it's been almost 2 weeks since I've been live, so I appreciate everyone for tapping in on this one. Like I said, expect a normal week of content next week from me, being back in the driver's seat and back to doing daily lives, back to doing, normal videos. And I think next week will be a probably a big emphasis on free agency, because really, while we are hyper focused on the draft, free agency is a big element to all of this. So we'll have to do some free agent stuff as well. But appreciate everyone tapping in on this one. Smash the like button if you haven't already. Grab your cookies on the way out. And I'm out of here for now. Peace. Smash that like button if you haven't already. Love to see you.